My name is Mike, and I am 58 years old. For 3 decades, I worked construction building houses for other families while raising my son Jason alone after my wife passed. Last week, he sent me a bottle of whiskey for my birthday, the same brand I was addicted to before getting sober 20 years ago, the same addiction I overcame for him. I stared at that bottle for hours, feeling something break inside me. The next day, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I tell you what I did with that whiskey bottle, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever felt forgotten by someone you sacrificed everything for. Your support helps stories like mine reach others who need to hear them. My life has been built on sweat and sacrifice. For 30 years, I climbed scaffolding, poured concrete, and framed houses under scorching sun and freezing rain. My hands, permanently calloused and scarred, tell the story of a man who never shied away from hard work. Everything changed when Sarah, my wife, died from cancer, when Jason was only 12. One day she was complaining about back pain, and 6 months later she was gone. I was suddenly a single father to a boy entering his teenage years, a man drowning in grief with bills piling up. Those first years were the hardest. I would work 10-hour shifts, rush home to make dinner for Jason, help with homework, and then collapse into bed only to do it all again the next day. There were no days off, no vacations, no relief. But I did it because Jason was all I had left of Sarah, and I would have moved mountains for that kid. The grief led me down a dark path. After Jason would go to bed, I found comfort in a bottle of Wild Creek whiskey. Just a glass at first to help me sleep, then 2 glasses, then half a bottle. I was functioning, still getting to work on time, still making dinner, still helping with homework. But inside I was crumbling. I will never forget the night that changed everything. Jason was 13. I had passed out on the couch, an empty bottle of Wild Creek on the coffee table. I woke up to him trying to put a blanket over me, tears streaming down his face. The fear in his eyes when he looked at me that night still haunts me. The next morning, I poured every drop of alcohol in our house down the drain while Jason watched. I made him a promise right there in our tiny kitchen. I am never touching this poison again, son. You are more important than this. I promise you that. And I kept that promise. For 20 years, not a single drop. Even when the cravings hit me so hard I would shake. Even at company parties, weddings, and celebrations. Even when Sarah's father died, and all I wanted was to numb the renewed grief. I stayed sober because I had made a promise to my son, and that promise meant everything. I worked overtime, took side jobs on weekends, and put away every spare penny so Jason could go to college. He was brilliant, always at the top of his class, and I knew he was destined for greater things than swinging a hammer like his old man. When he got accepted to State University, with a partial scholarship, I was the proudest father alive. We still needed to cover half the tuition, but I had been saving for this moment since he was born. Those 4 years were tight financially. I downgraded from our small house to an even smaller apartment to afford his dorm and expenses. I picked up night security shifts at the construction sites. My knees and back were giving out, but I pushed through. Every sacrifice was worth it when he graduated with honors in business. That was when things began to change. Jason got a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city. He met Amanda Hayes, the daughter of Harold Hayes, who owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states. They fell in love, and within a year, they were engaged. I was happy for him, truly. Amanda seemed like a nice girl, well-educated and polite. But from the moment I met Harold at their engagement dinner, I felt the divide forming. Harold was tall, fit, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He talked about his golf club membership, his vacation home in Florida, and his collection of vintage cars. Meanwhile, I sat there in my best shirt that I had ironed 3 times to remove the wrinkles, conscious of my weathered appearance and simple vocabulary. The wedding was lavish, held at a country club where Harold was a member. I emptied my savings to buy Jason and Amanda a modest but nice gift and to rent a suit that would not embarrass my son. Throughout the reception, I noticed how Jason seamlessly fit into this new world. He knew which fork to use, how to make small talk about stocks and foreign policy things we never discussed at our dinner table. I was simultaneously proud and heartbroken. My son had outgrown me. As a wedding gift, Harold bought them a house in his neighborhood, a sprawling 2-story with a 3-car garage. I brought over a toolbox as a housewarming gift offering to help with any repairs they might need. Jason thanked me but said they had a maintenance service that came with the house. My toolbox ended up in their basement. The visits grew less frequent. The phone calls shorter. Jason was always busy with work or traveling with Amanda or attending events with Harold and his country club friends. When we did speak, the conversation felt forced, like he was checking a task off his list. I remained in my small apartment, now working as a site supervisor, since my body could no longer handle the physical demands of construction. The pay was better, but decades of physical labor had taken their toll. At 55, I moved with the stiffness of a much older man, my left knee requiring a brace after years of abuse. While Jason and Amanda posted photos from Paris, Cabo, and New York on social media, I spent my weekends alone, occasionally meeting Thomas, my only remaining close friend, for coffee. Thomas had been with me through it all, the grief, the drinking, the recovery. He was the only one who truly understood the depth of my sacrifice for Jason. I told myself Jason was just busy building his life, that this distance was natural. But deep down, a voice whispered that my son was not just moving forward, he was leaving me behind. And that was a much harder truth to bear. The changes in Jason were subtle at first, but became impossible to ignore as time passed. My warm, thoughtful boy, who once made me handmade birthday cards, transformed into a man who seemed perpetually checking his watch when we were together. The son who used to call me for advice now directed conversations away whenever I offered a suggestion about anything. I tried everything to maintain our connection. Every Sunday, I would call him regardless of whether he had returned my previous call. I would ask about his work, though I understood little of the marketing terminology he used. I would ask about their house, remembering the time he sharply corrected me for calling their formal dining room a fancy eating place. I swallowed my pride each time, telling myself that parents must adapt as their children grow. When they first moved into their new home, I offered to help install shelving in their garage. Jason declined, mentioning that Harold had recommended a professional service. When their basement flooded after heavy rain, I drove over immediately with my shop vac and tools, only to find a water damage restoration company already there, hired by Harold. Each rejection stung, but I pushed the pain aside. At least he was doing well. That was all that mattered, right? The family gatherings at Harold's mansion were exercises in humiliation. Harold never outright disrespected me, but his condescension was evident in every interaction. He would explain simple concepts to me as if I were a child, ask if I knew what various foods were at dinner, or loudly clarify my construction speak to others. His friends would smile politely in my direction before continuing conversations about vacation properties and investment portfolios, topics as foreign to me as Sanskrit. Through it all, Jason never defended me. Sometimes I caught him wincing when I spoke, or subtly shaking his head at something I said. Once he corrected my pronunciation of charcuterie in front of everyone, his face flushed with embarrassment. Not at his rudeness, but at my ignorance. The pattern of canceled plans became so common, I began to expect them. The last-minute text saying he had to work late. the apologetic call explaining that they had been invited to a more important event. I kept a mental log of these rejections, though I tried not to. Birthdays missed. Holidays where I was invited as an afterthought, if at all. For his 35th birthday, I spent weeks creating a handcrafted wooden chest, the kind he had admired in a magazine once. I stained it, lined it with cedar-added brass fittings, and engraved his initials on the top. It took vacation days and late nights to complete my arthritic hands protesting the detailed work. The pride I felt finishing it almost eclipsed the pain in my joints. I took 2 buses to reach their neighborhood, the wooden chest carefully wrapped and protected in my arms. When I arrived at their house, the party was in full swing. Men in blazers and women in cocktail dresses mingled on their expansive patio. A catering team served appetizers I could not pronounce. I stood at the edge of the gathering in my clean but worn button-up shirt, the gift suddenly seeming inadequate among the wrapped boxes from high-end stores. Jason spotted me and came over, surprise evident on his face. "Dad, we were not expecting you until later," he said, glancing at his watch. "The invitation said 3 o'clock, I replied, trying to keep my voice light. Right. Well, come in. There is food inside." He took the gift, placing it on a table with the others without comment, and quickly returned to a group of friends. I spent the next hour standing awkwardly near the food table, occasionally making small talk with a caterer who seemed to pity me. When gift opening began, I watched as Jason unwrapped golf clubs from Harold designer clothes from Amanda and various expensive items from friends. My wooden chest was opened last, almost as an afterthought. "Oh, this is handmade," Jason said, examining it with a forced smile. "Thanks, Dad." He quickly moved on to thanking everyone for coming. Later, as I prepared to leave, I overheard Jason speaking to a friend near the bar, not realizing I was around the corner. "Yeah, my dad is still stuck in that blue-collar mentality. Cannot get him to upgrade his lifestyle at all. Still wears the same style clothes from 20 years ago, still thinks homemade gifts are appropriate. Amanda keeps trying to help him, but he is pretty set in his ways." The shame in his voice was unmistakable. I quietly left without saying goodbye, the 2-hour bus ride home giving me plenty of time to process the depth of my son's embarrassment over my existence. The final blow came 6 months later when I received a Christmas card addressed from the Wilson Hayes family. Jason had added his father-in-law's last name to his own without ever mentioning it to me. I learned later from Thomas, whose daughter worked at the same company as Jason, that he exclusively went by Jason Hayes in professional settings. He had effectively erased any connection to me, to his working-class origins, to the name I had given him. Through all of this, I remained silent. What good would confrontation do? He had chosen his path, a path far from the construction sites and modest living of his father. A path where the dirt under my fingernails and the calluses on my hands were sources of shame rather than pride. A path where I simply did not belong. My 58th birthday arrived on a Tuesday, a gray, drizzling October day that matched my mood. I woke up with that momentary hope that accompanies special days, the childish expectation that today might be different before reality settled back in. I made my coffee, took my arthritis medication, and headed to work just like any other day. Growing up, birthdays were never extravagant affairs in my family. My father worked at the steel mill, and money was always tight. But my mother would always make my favorite meal, chocolate cake, for dessert, and there would be one thoughtfully chosen gift wrapped in the Sunday comics. When Sarah was alive, she continued the tradition, making each birthday feel special, despite our limited means. After she died, I tried to maintain normalcy for Jason's sake. I would use my birthday as an excuse to get pizza and ice cream, turning the day into a treat for him rather than a reminder of our loss. As he grew older, he began making cards for me, planning little surprises like breakfast in bed or a special drawing. The The year he turned 16, he saved up from his part-time job bagging groceries to buy me a new work jacket, having noticed how worn my old one had become. Those memories made the silence of my phone that morning all the more deafening. Throughout the day, I received the standard Facebook messages from acquaintances and distant relatives, the automated email from my insurance company, and a text from Thomas asking if I wanted to grab dinner that weekend to celebrate. But nothing from Jason. I kept my phone close, checking it perhaps too frequently as the hours passed. During lunch break, I scrolled through photos from previous birthdays, lingering on one from Jason's college graduation day. We had gone to a steakhouse afterward, just the two of us, to celebrate both his achievement and my birthday, which had fallen the same week. In the photo, his arm was around my shoulders, both of us smiling broadly. Where had that connection gone by 5 p.m.? I had given up hope of hearing from him. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, buying a single serving of cake from the bakery section and a frozen dinner, a pathetic birthday feast for one. At 9:30 that night, as I was preparing for bed, my phone finally rang. Jason's name appeared on the screen, sending a rush of warmth through me despite everything. I answered immediately. "Jason, good to hear from you," I said, trying to keep the eagerness from my voice. "Hey, Dad. Happy birthday," he replied, his voice distracted. I could hear voices in the background, the clinking of glasses. "Sorry it is so late. We have been at this client dinner and it just ran long." "No problem at all. Just good to hear from you. How are things going?" "Busy, you know how it is. Look, I cannot talk long. We are just settling the bill. I sent something your way, should arrive tomorrow. Nothing fancy, just a little something. You did not have to do that," I said, though secretly pleased he had remembered at all. "Yeah, well, Amanda reminded me honestly." He chuckled, the casual admission stinging more than he knew. "Anyway, hope you had a good day. I should go, they are waiting for me." "Of course, thanks for calling, son." "Sure thing. Take care, Dad." The call lasted exactly 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I stared at the call duration on my screen afterward, a numeric representation of my importance in my son's life. True to his word, a package arrived the following afternoon. The delivery woman handed me a box about the size of a shoebox, neatly wrapped in generic blue paper, with a printed shipping label from an online retailer. No hand delivery, no personal touch. I placed it on my kitchen table, allowing myself a moment of anticipation. Perhaps it was something thoughtful. A book by an author I enjoyed, a new tool for my weekend woodworking projects, or a comfortable shirt, something that showed he still knew me, still thought about what might bring me joy. With careful fingers, I removed the wrapping paper, then opened the box. Inside was a bottle of Wild Creek whiskey, the mid-shelf variety that sells for about $30. The exact brand I had poured down the drain 20 years ago while making my promise to him. Accompanying it was a small card with a generic birthday message signed with a hastily scrawled Jason, and below that, in different handwriting, arranged by Kelly office admin. I sat heavily in my kitchen chair, the bottle before me like a ghost from the past. The whiskey glowed amber in the afternoon light, streaming through my window, both tempting and accusing. 20 years of sobriety stared back at me, challenged by this thoughtless gift. Had he forgotten? Had the most significant promise of my life, the turning point in our relationship, simply slipped his mind? Or worse, did he remember and not care? Which possibility hurt more? As I turned the bottle, examining it as if it might reveal answers, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. It was not just Wild Creek whiskey. It was their original formula, the specific variety I had been addicted to, the one whose empty bottles once lined our recycling bin, the one whose smell had permeated my clothes, my breath, my life during those dark days. This was not just any whiskey. This was my weakness in a bottle sent by the very person for whom I had conquered it. The final insult lay in the discovery that he had not even purchased it himself. Arranged by Kelly office admin said it all. My son had delegated my birthday to his secretary, who obviously knew nothing about me. He had not spent even 5 minutes of thought on what might be an appropriate gift for his father. I sat there as the afternoon sun faded into evening, the bottle untouched before me. The whiskey I had once craved now represented something entirely different, a symbol of how little my son knew me or cared to remember. As darkness fell, I found myself at a crossroads. Would I open it, falling back into old patterns to numb the pain of rejection? Or would I find another path forward? I placed the bottle in my cabinet, closed the door, and went to bed, unsure of what morning would bring. The morning after receiving the whiskey, I awoke before sunrise, my mind clearer than it had been in months. The hurt remained a dull ache in my chest, but something else had emerged alongside it, a quiet dignity I had nearly forgotten I possessed. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table considering my options. The bottle remained in the cabinet untouched. I could pour it down the drain, a symbolic recreation of that moment 20 years ago. But that seemed too easy, too private. This pain demanded acknowledgement. Or I could confront Jason directly, call him out on his thoughtlessness. But what would that accomplish beyond creating more distance between us? My phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. It was Thomas. "Happy birthday a day late," he said when I answered. "Got plans this weekend for celebrating. Nothing special," I replied, not wanting to burden him with my disappointment. "Well, cancel whatever nothing you have planned. You will never believe this, but I got us invited to a barbecue at Harold Hayes' place on Saturday." Harold Hayes, Jason's father-in-law. "How did you manage that?" Thomas chuckled. "My new client is Harold's neighbor. They got to talking, my name came up. Harold recognized it from me being your friend, and next thing I know, there is an invitation. Apparently Harold is having some big cookout with friends and family. Jason and Amanda will be there. Thought you might want to reconnect with your son." I was about to decline automatically when my eyes drifted to the cabinet containing the whiskey bottle. Slowly, an idea began to take shape in my mind, not born of spite, but of a desire for recognition, for visibility in my son's life. "Actually, Thomas, I think I will join you." "Great, I will pick you up at noon on Saturday. Wear something nice, but not too nice. We do not want to look like we are trying too hard," he joked. After we hung up, I opened the cabinet and took out the whiskey bottle, placing it on the counter. This would not be about revenge. This would be about honesty, about holding up a mirror to the reality of our relationship. I spent the next day preparing. I found a gift box at the dollar store nicer than the one the whiskey had arrived in. I purchased proper tissue paper, a new card, and even a small ribbon. I took care with the presentation, wrapping the bottle as if it were a treasured gift rather than a regifted insult. On the card I wrote in my neatest handwriting, "Harold, I thought you might appreciate this more than I can. With warm regards, Mike Wilson." Simple, honest, with no hint of the pain behind it. Saturday arrived and Thomas picked me up as promised. He raised an eyebrow at the gift in my hands, but did not comment. The drive to Harold's neighborhood took us from my modest apartment complex through increasingly affluent areas, the houses growing larger, the lawns more manicured, the cars and driveways more expensive. Finally, we pulled up to Harold's mansion, a sprawling stone and brick structure with perfectly landscaped grounds. Cars lined the circular driveway, most of them luxury models that cost more than I had earned in years of hard labor. My stomach tightened as we approached the front door, gift in hand. Thomas gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder before ringing the bell. A young woman in what appeared to be a uniform answered, directing us to the backyard, where the event was in full swing. The backyard was enormous, featuring an Olympic-sized pool, an outdoor kitchen that was bigger than my entire apartment, and several seating areas where guests gathered in small groups. A bar had been set up near the pool, staffed by 2 professional bartenders, mixing elaborate cocktails. Waitstaff circulated with trays of appetizers. The casual barbecue was more luxurious than any restaurant I had ever visited. I spotted Jason immediately standing near the grill with Harold, both holding beers and laughing. My son looked perfectly at home in these surroundings, dressed in designer casual wear that probably cost more than my monthly rent. For a moment I hesitated. Was this really the right approach? But then Jason glanced over, saw me, and the brief flash of annoyance that crossed his face before he composed himself steeled my resolve. Thomas and I made our way over. Jason's smile tightened as we approached. "Dad, this is a surprise. I did not know you were coming," he said, his tone suggesting it was not a pleasant surprise. "Thomas got an invitation and was kind enough to bring me as his +1, I explained. "Hope that is all right." Of course," Harold interjected before Jason could respond. "Any father of Jason is welcome here. Good to see you again, Mike." His tone was jovial but carried the same underlying condescension I remembered. He turned to introduce us to the other men standing nearby, all golf buddies from his country club. As the introductions concluded, I seized the moment, extending the gift toward Harold. "I brought you a little something to say. Thank you for having us," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Harold looked genuinely surprised. "Well, that was not necessary, but very thoughtful." He accepted the package with a nod. Jason's expression shifted from forced politeness to confusion to the beginnings of alarm as he registered what was happening. I could almost see the gears turning in his mind, the memory of what he had sent me belatedly surfacing. "Why do not you open it now?" I suggested. "I think you will find it useful for the party." Jason took a half-step forward, as if to intervene, but it was too late. Harold was already removing the ribbon and lifting the lid of the box. His eyebrows raised slightly as he withdrew the bottle of Wild Creek whiskey. "Well, thank you. Always good to have spirits on hand for guests," he said politely, though his expression suggested he was more of a Scotch man than a mid-shelf whiskey drinker. "That is the same bottle Jason sent me for my birthday this week," I said conversationally, watching my son's face pale. "I thought it might be better appreciated here." Harold's expression changed, confusion giving way to understanding as he glanced between the bottle and Jason. "This was a gift from Jason to you," he clarified, his tone sharpening slightly. Jason stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Dad has never been much of a drinker, so I thought he might want to bring it to share at gatherings like this." He attempted the explanation, weak even to my ears. I met his gaze directly. "Actually, I have not had a drop of alcohol in 20 years, not since I promised my 13-year-old son I would get sober for him." The silence that followed was deafening. Harold's expression darkened as he turned to Jason, who was now visibly uncomfortable. "You sent your recovering alcoholic father a bottle of whiskey for his birthday?" Harold asked, his voice low but clear. Jason's face flushed. "It was a mistake, obviously. Kelly in the office handles gift purchases. She must have misunderstood." "Your secretary bought your father's birthday gift." Harold pressed, disapproval evident. Around us, conversations had quieted, other guests sensing the tension, but trying to pretend they were not listening. Amanda appeared at Jason's side, concern on her face as she assessed the situation. "What is going on?" she asked quietly. Harold held up the bottle. "Jason sent this to Mike for his birthday, apparently unaware or unconcerned that his father has been sober for 20 years. Amanda's eyes widened as she turned to Jason. "You did what?" The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. "We talked about getting your dad that woodworking book he wanted. You told me you ordered it." Jason's composure cracked. "I was busy with the Peterson account. I asked Kelly to handle it, and I guess she did not know about Dad's history." "Because you never told her," I said quietly. "Because it was not important enough to mention." "That is unfair." Jason snapped, a flash of anger replacing his embarrassment. "You are making a scene over a simple mistake." Harold set the bottle down on a nearby table with surprising force. "No, son. You made a series of mistakes, delegating your father's gift to your secretary, not checking what was purchased, and now not simply owning up to your thoughtlessness." What happened next shocked me more than anything that had occurred thus far. "And I have to say I am deeply disappointed," Harold continued. "Not just as your father-in-law, but as someone who has been in recovery for 5 years myself." The revelation hung in the air. 5 years, Harold Hayes, successful businessman, golfer, country club member, was also in recovery. Jason's expression suggested this was news to him as well, his mouth slightly open in surprise. "You never told me that," he finally managed. "Because it is personal," Harold replied. "But I would expect my daughter's husband to know that sending alcohol to someone in recovery is not just thoughtless, it is potentially harmful." Amanda placed a hand on Jason's arm. "I had no idea about this gift, Mike. I am so sorry." Jason's embarrassment transformed to anger, his pride wounded in front of his in-laws and their social circle. He turned to me, voice low and accusing. "You did this on purpose, did not you? Brought it here to humiliate me in front of everyone. Real, mature dad." I maintained my composure, though his words stung. "No, Jason. I brought it here because I wanted you to see what you had done. You have forgotten who I am. Maybe you never really knew. Or maybe you are just resentful that I have built a better life than you ever could." He hissed, the words escaping before he could stop them. A collective intake of breath from those nearby told me others had heard. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. Harold's expression hardened further. "That is enough," Harold said firmly. He turned to the gathered onlookers. "Why do not you all enjoy the pool area? The staff will bring out the main course shortly." As people reluctantly dispersed, he turned back to us. "Jason, I suggest you take some time to cool down. Mike, would you join me in my study for a moment?" Without waiting for a response, Harold began walking toward the house. After a moment's hesitation, I followed, leaving Jason standing with Amanda, her expression a mixture of shock and disappointment. Harold's study was exactly what I would have expected: wood-paneled walls lined with books, a massive desk, leather chairs, and what appeared to be original artwork. He closed the door behind us and moved to a small refrigerator in the corner, withdrawing 2 cans of sparkling water. "I hope you do not mind if we skip the alcohol," he said, with the first genuine smile I had seen from him. He handed me a can and gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Please sit." I lowered myself into the chair, unsure what to expect. Harold took the seat across from me, his demeanor completely changed from the condescending host I had known previously. 20 years is impressive," he said after a moment. "I struggle with 5 sometimes. Some days are harder than others," I admitted. "Today was one of the harder ones." Harold nodded thoughtfully. "I was a functional alcoholic for decades. Built my business, maintained my marriage, raised my daughter, all while drinking myself to sleep every night. Heart attack at 53 finally scared me straight." What was your turning point? The question was asked with such straightforward honesty that I found myself answering with equal candor. Jason found me passed out on the couch when he was 13. The look in his eyes that night, I shook my head at the memory. I never wanted him to look at me that way again. And yet he sends you whiskey for your birthday, Harold mused. The very thing you gave up for him. He has a different life now, I said simply. Harold leaned forward, his expression serious. Let me be clear about something, Mike. I have been guilty of judging you by your occupation, your economic status, things that ultimately mean nothing about a man's character. That was wrong of me, and today has shown me just how wrong. The dignity with which you handled this situation, the sacrifices you have made for your son, these speak to your character far more than any job title or bank account. His words caught me off guard. This was not the Harold Hayes I thought I knew. I think we might have more in common than either of us realized, he continued. Would you consider joining me for a recovery meeting next week? I host a small group for professionals at my office. It is private, confidential. Might do us both some good. The invitation was so unexpected that I did not immediately respond. Was this pity some kind of wealthy man's charity project? Reading my hesitation, Harold added, "The bottle was a test, Mike, though not one you designed, and it revealed much about both you and Jason. You passed with flying colors. My son-in-law has some growing up to do." As strange as it seemed, I sensed genuine respect in Harold's voice. And in that moment, something shifted between us, the beginnings of an unlikely understanding forming in the wake of my son's thoughtless gift. The fallout from the whiskey incident rippled through the following weeks in ways I never could have anticipated. Jason went from calling me once a month to not calling at all. My text messages were met with one-word responses if they were answered at all. I had expected this reaction, the wounded pride of someone confronted with their own thoughtlessness. What I had not expected was everything else that changed. 3 days after the barbecue, Harold called me. Not to discuss Jason, but to remind me about the recovery meeting he had mentioned. Unsure, but curious, I agreed to attend. The meeting was held in a private room at Harold's main dealership after hours attended by 8 people ranging from a young mechanic to a judge nearing retirement. Harold introduced me simply as Mike, 20 years sober, with a respect in his voice I had never heard before. That meeting became a weekly commitment. Harold would send his personal driver to pick me up despite my protests that I could take the bus. During those rides, I learned that beneath the luxury cars and designer clothes, Harold had fought demons similar to mine. His recovery had come later in life, but it had transformed him nonetheless. I was a real bastard before, he admitted during one ride. Success made me think I was better than everyone else. Getting sober forced me to realize how much of my life I had wasted on appearances. Our unlikely friendship grew from those meetings and conversations. We discovered shared interests beyond sobriety, a mutual love of baseball, of John Wayne movies, of wood craftsmanship. I learned that before becoming a business mogul, Harold had worked as a car mechanic, his hands once as calloused as mine. 1 month after the barbecue, I received another unexpected call, this time from Amanda. She asked if she could stop by my apartment that afternoon. I agreed hastily, cleaning my modest living space before her arrival. Amanda arrived looking slightly uncomfortable in her luxury SUV, parked amid the older vehicles in my complex's lot. But once inside, she relaxed, accepting the coffee I offered and sitting at my small kitchen table. "I wanted to apologize for what happened," she began. "Jason's behavior was unacceptable." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured her. "I do, though. I have been complicit in how he has treated you." I saw the distance growing, and did nothing. She stared into her coffee. The truth is, I love your son, but I do not always like who he becomes around my father's circle. He tries so hard to fit in that he forgets who he really is. Her honesty surprised me. We talked for over an hour, Amanda sharing how isolated she sometimes felt, despite their social calendar, how she missed the more grounded Jason she had first fallen in love with. Before leaving, she asked if I would be willing to meet for coffee regularly, apart from Jason. I agreed, touched by the gesture. These weekly coffee meetings with Amanda became another unexpected bright spot. She was intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in my stories from the construction world. Through her, I received secondhand news of Jason, who was apparently working longer hours than ever, coming home stressed and distant. The most dramatic change came 6 weeks after the barbecue. Harold called me directly one evening. "Mike, I have a proposition for you," he said without preamble. "One of my construction contractors mentioned they are looking for a consultant with extensive practical experience. Someone who knows the reality of job sites, not just the theory. Would you be interested in meeting with them?" The opportunity was with Hayes Construction, a subsidiary of Harold's business empire I had not even known existed. The interview was more a formality than an evaluation, the position already all but mine. At 58, I found myself with a consulting job that paid more than double my supervisor role with better hours and benefits that included comprehensive health insurance for the first time in my life. My new office was modest but comfortable with a window overlooking the site where Hayes Construction was building a new community center. My expertise was actually valued, my decades of hands-on experience seen as an asset rather than something to hide. Young project managers sought my advice, architects consulted me on practical applications of their designs. For the first time in years, I felt respected for exactly who I was. The irony was not lost on me that this respect came through Harold, the very man I had once resented for taking my son away. 4 months after the whiskey incident, Amanda called with news that sent my world spinning again. She was pregnant. I was going to be a grandfather. Her voice was joyful over the phone, but tinged with sadness too. "Jason wants to tell you himself, but he is still working through things," she explained. "I thought you should know right away, though. This is your grandchild, too." The news filled me with conflicting emotions, elation at the prospect of a grandchild, warring with the pain of my ongoing estrangement from Jason. Would I be allowed to be part of this child's life? Or would I be kept at the same distance, a grandfather in name only? That night, I sat in my apartment, now filled with new furniture Amanda had helped me select, looking at the space with new eyes. Could a child visit here? Would my grandchild know me as a real person, or as a distant figure occasionally mentioned but rarely seen? Despite all the positive changes in my life, the silence from Jason remained a wound that would not heal. I had gained respect, friendship, financial security, and the promise of a grandchild. But I had lost my son, and no amount of newfound prosperity could fill that void. As the weeks passed and Amanda's pregnancy progressed, I wondered if the impending arrival of his child might soften Jason's heart. Becoming a parent changes you, forces you to reconsider your own childhood, your own parents. Perhaps the birth of his child would bridge the gap that the bottle of whiskey had exposed between us. I did not want vengeance or apology. I simply wanted my son back, to be recognized as the imperfect but loving father I had tried to be seen not for what I lacked, but for what I had given. The question was whether Jason would ever be ready to see it. 6 months after the whiskey bottle incident, my phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Jason's name appeared on the screen. My heart raced as I answered, unsure what to expect. "Dad," he said, his voice tight. I was wondering if we could meet, to talk. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes the following afternoon. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a quiet table in the corner. When Jason walked in, I was struck by how tired he looked. His designer clothes were as immaculate as ever, but dark circles shadowed his eyes and his shoulders carried a new tension. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands wrapped around the mug as if seeking warmth. "You look good," he said after an awkward silence. "The new job must be treating you well." "It is," I acknowledged. "How are you?" Amanda mentioned. "You have been working long hours." "Yeah." He stared into his coffee. "The Peterson account. Big client." Another silence fell. I waited, giving him space to find his words. Finally, he took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," he said, meeting my eyes for the first time. The whiskey was, "There is no excuse. I delegated your gift to Kelly. I did not check what she bought, and I did not remember the most important promise you ever made to me. I failed you as a son." The words seemed rehearsed but sincere. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "The truth is, I have been failing you for years," he admitted, his voice growing hoarse. "I got caught up in trying to be someone else, someone who belonged in Harold's world. I was embarrassed by where I came from, by the construction dust that used to cling to your clothes, by the calluses on your hands. I wanted to erase all that from my life, including you." The brutal honesty stung, but there was also relief in finally hearing the truth spoken aloud. "What changed?" I asked quietly. Jason let out a hollow laugh. "Everything. After that day at Harold's, he pulled me aside later and told me about his own past. About working as a mechanic before building his business. About his drinking. Things I never knew. Then he said something I cannot get out of my head. He said, I would give anything to have had a father who stayed sober for me, who sacrificed everything for my education. You had that, and you threw it away for what? To impress people like me." I was stunned. Harold had defended me in ways I never expected. "Amanda has been furious with me," Jason continued. "She told me she has been having coffee with you, that she sees in you all the qualities she had hoped I possessed. She said she is worried our child will have a father as shallow as I have become." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his teenage years that it made my heart ache. "But it was the baby that really forced me to face myself," he said. "I started thinking about what kind of father I want to be, what values I want to pass on, and I realized I was becoming exactly the kind of man I would not want my child to become." Tears welled in his eyes. "I am scared, Dad. Scared of failing as a father the way I failed as a son." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his, the way I used to when he was a boy, frightened by thunderstorms. "Jason, listen to me. You have not failed as a son. You got lost for a while. We all get lost sometimes. How can you forgive me so easily?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Because that is what parents do," I said simply. "We love without conditions. We forgive without keeping score. Your mother would have done the same." At the mention of his mother, the tears he had been holding back spilled over. He quickly wiped them away, conscious of the public setting. "I do not deserve your forgiveness," he said. "It is not about deserving. It is about family. About choosing to see the best in each other even when we fall short." Jason nodded, composing himself. "I want to do better, Dad. I want my child to know their grandfather. The real you, not the version of you I created in my mind to justify my behavior." He hesitated, then continued. "We are converting the guest room into a nursery. I was hoping..." Would you help me not hiring someone, but you and me building something together, like we used to when I was a kid? The invitation was small but significant, a tiny bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. I would like that, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. We spent another hour in that coffee shop talking more openly than we had in years, about his fears of fatherhood, about his struggles with identity in his new social circle, about my new job and unexpected friendship with Harold. Not all wounds were healed, not all bridges rebuilt, but it was a beginning. The following weekend, I arrived at Jason and Amanda's house with my toolbox, the same one that had been relegated to their basement years earlier. Jason met me at the door, dressed not in his usual designer casual wear, but in old jeans and a faded t-shirt I recognized from his college days. Amanda greeted me with a hug, her pregnancy now visible beneath her sweater. There was a warmth in the house I had not felt before, a sense that I was truly welcome rather than merely tolerated. The guest room was spacious and bright with windows overlooking their backyard. Jason had purchased paint crib components and shelving materials, all waiting to be assembled and installed. I have no idea what I am doing, he confessed with a self-deprecating smile. I thought I could just watch some YouTube videos, but it seems more complicated than I expected. That is what dads are for, I replied, opening my toolbox. Let me show you how it is done. For the next several weekends, we worked together transforming the room. I taught him how to properly prep walls for painting, how to ensure shelves were level, how to assemble furniture that would be sturdy and safe. His hands, soft from years of office work, developed small calluses. He did not seem to mind. As we worked, we talked. Really talked without the pretense and performance that had characterized our interactions for so long. I shared stories from my construction days that I had previously censored, thinking they would bore or embarrass him. To my surprise, he listened with genuine interest, asking questions about techniques and tools. I used to be so proud telling my elementary school friends that my dad built houses, he admitted one afternoon as we installed crown molding. I do not know when that pride turned to shame. I am sorry for that, Dad. We cannot change the past, I told him, but we can build a different future. 2 months later, I received a frantic call from Jason at 3 a.m. Amanda's water broke. We are heading to the hospital. Can you meet us there? I dressed quickly and took a rideshare to the hospital, arriving just after they had been admitted. To my surprise, I was ushered into the delivery room immediately. Not just allowed in, but specifically requested by both Jason and Amanda. We want you here, Jason said, gripping my shoulder. This is your grandchild. The labor was long, stretching through the morning and into the afternoon. I stayed offering support, fetching ice chips, being present in a way I had not been able to be for so long. Harold and his wife arrived later, and the waiting room filled with friends and family. At 4:23 p.m., my grandson entered the world, a healthy, crying, perfect baby boy. As the nurses cleaned and measured him, Jason came to find me in the waiting room, his face alight with a joy I had not seen since he was a child. Dad, he said, his voice breaking, would you like to meet your grandson? I followed him back to the recovery room, where Amanda cradled the newborn. She smiled tiredly as I approached. Mike, meet Michael Jason Wilson, she said, using the family name Jason had once tried to distance himself from. Named after his grandfather. I looked at Jason in surprise. He nodded, his eyes wet. It was the only name that felt right, he said. I want him to have your strength, your integrity, your work ethic, all the things I tried to run from, but now hope to embody. As I held my namesake for the first time, I was struck by the perfect circle of life. The tiny hands that would one day grow calloused from work or soft from office life. The endless possibilities contained in this new beginning. 2 hours later, Harold arrived with coffee for everyone. As Amanda dozed and the baby slept in the hospital bassinet, Harold and I sat with Jason, two grandfathers sharing quiet conversation with a new father. "He looks like you, Mike," Harold observed. "Got that same strong jaw." "Poor kid," I joked, and we all laughed softly. "I think he hit the grandfather lottery," Jason said, looking between us. Two very different men with very similar hearts. Harold raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Michael Jason Wilson, may he know where he comes from and find his own way forward." I raised my own cup, marveling at the journey that had brought us here. From a bottle of whiskey intended to wound to a cup of coffee shared in celebration. From isolation to connection. From resentment to reconciliation. My 59th birthday arrived 2 weeks later. Instead of a silent apartment and a store-bought cake for one, I found myself surrounded by family. Jason and Amanda hosted a dinner at their home with Harold and his wife Thomas and his daughter and baby Michael all present. The table was laden with food, the conversation warm and inclusive. When the time came for gifts, Jason handed me a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of 3 generations, a picture taken at the hospital, Michael cradled in my arms, Jason's hand on my shoulder. The frame was handcrafted wood made by Jason himself in the workshop Harold had helped him set up in their garage. "I am learning," he said with a shrug. "Thought it was time I tried making something with my hands." No gift could have meant more. No bottle of the finest whiskey could compare to this moment of recognition, of being truly seen by my son. As I look back on the journey from that whiskey bottle to this moment of reconciliation, I realize the gift was never about the alcohol. It was about awareness, about holding up a mirror to a relationship that had lost its way. Sometimes the hardest gifts to receive are the ones that force us to confront uncomfortable truths. And sometimes the most meaningful ones come not in fancy packaging, but in the form of second chances. Whiskey might age well in barrels, becoming more valuable with time, but relationships require active tending, honest communication, and the courage to be vulnerable. My relationship with Jason had been neglected, then tested, then finally restored stronger for having weathered the storm. Looking at my family gathered around the table, I felt a peace I had not known in years. The whiskey I had once used to numb my pain now had no power over me. I had found something far more intoxicating. The pure joy of being known, being loved, being part of something larger than myself. What is the most valuable bottle in your life? Is it filled with liquid or with memories? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more tales of family forgiveness and finding your way back home. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that it is never too late to rebuild what once seemed lost.